Yes, please.
What's on? Oh yeah, that's.
Jake, Rob Brennan. Yes. How are you? Something that started working on with Lisa and Brian Castle and some other guys. Just kind of making the case for almost like a.
You look exactly the same. I've grown up a lot. Congratulations.
Serve on the state's rural policy. Yeah. And you'll stop but I think where you have people who are behind the second homes, right? And it's that competition. And it's also not only the competition of second home owners versus first
Good to see you. Good to see you.
So I think I'm going to let the town manager start if he's up for it. We're in his community. And generally speaking, as former local officials ourselves, we usually give the local official the first word.
Governor, I'm humbled by your kindness. I'm just going to stand up and welcome everyone. I'm Julian Suso, Falmouth Town Manager, and we are delighted to host the Governor, Lieutenant Governor, Secretary, and all others, many of our colleagues here in this gathering, and this really perfect example of affordable housing initiative that so many worked on together, including private nonprofits, and which we'll be hearing from, and our colleagues in this community. So thank you for the opportunity to come together and the honor of hosting this gathering, and thank you, Governor, Lieutenant Governor, for all your fine work. Senator Moran, also. Sue, it's always great to see you. It's a former
Another former local official.
And we love those local government connections, those of us who've spent our entire careers here. It makes a world of difference, as I know that you're aware, when you have that insight at the state level. So thank you for that, and I will welcome all the comments.
Thank you very much, Julian. I'm going to be mercifully brief. I'm going to say three things. The first is we and the legislature have worked very hard to put significant resources to work over the course of the past 7 years on housing. And I think we've done a lot of good things. I also think we have and had a shortage here in the Commonwealth that has existed for a long time. We used to build 30,000 new units of housing every year, and then around 1990, we started building somewhere between 8 and 10,000. And so for the past 30 years, we've been building about a third of the new units of housing that we used to build. And if you actually look at what's happened to our population and what's happened to the actual number of homes we've built, it's not even close. And one of the things that happens when you don't keep up is you create shortages. And when you create shortages, you create demand. And when you create demand, you create price spikes. And I think all of us have seen that happen in a very small microcosm way as we come out of the pandemic. But we were already there in some respects. And some of it had to do with our zoning laws, which many of us worked like mad over the past 5 years to get changed so that we would see no more stories written that said something like, City Council votes 7-4 in favor of new housing plan, and it failed. Honestly, every time that happened, I just banged my head against the wall, wherever I was. And we're now to the point where a simple majority works, and we have a lot of, that was a lot of work, and a lot of folks in this room and other rooms put a ton of work into getting the legislature to understand why we needed to do something about that. And we've managed to put a lot of money to work over the course of the past few years, but it's not enough. And that's part of the reason why we filed $1 billion in ARPA funds, primarily focused on housing, as part of our proposal with respect to how to put about half of the ARPA money to work. And I think this is a great state. You know, the Lieutenant Governor and I both love the Commonwealth. But if we don't do something more than we've done with respect to the issues we have around housing, whether it's senior housing, downtown housing, workforce housing, affordable housing, housing with services, I mean, take your pick, and also put some serious elbow grease into home ownership, we're simply never going to get to where we need to get to if we want to make this a place where people of regular and modest means can find a way to put a stake in the ground and make a living and make a life. And the final thing I'll say is almost every survey, every study I've seen for the past 5 or 6 years says the single biggest thing that makes Massachusetts an expensive place to live more than anything else is the cost of housing. And when you think about that giant nut in rent or mortgage that people pay and what that does to their ability to pay for almost anything else, it really is something that deserves to be recognized and dealt with in a serious way. And I believe the federal money gives us a transformational opportunity and we shouldn't miss it. I'm going to stop there and see if Lieutenant Governor wants to correct me on most of this.
We'll just add a couple of exclamation points there. Eric Tarkington, we served in the House together. It's always great to be with a former colleague and a local official and to be here in this room because 2 years ago when the Secretary and I were here, there was no room, there were no homes. It looked very different, and it's a real compliment and credit to all of you for solving a couple of problems. One, adding more housing and a mixed income housing here, as well as taking a piece of land that was just noted for being pretty much a wetland and figuring out how to turn it into a place that could be developed for these beautiful homes. And it all started with your commitment, I think it was community preservation funds, that you acquired this property in the first place. So real credit to you making decisions as local officials along the course of time that made this possible. So we're really happy to see it and to put the exclamation point on that we want to see more housing like this all across our Commonwealth. Every community needs it. You were also early on adopters of housing choice. So thank you for that, and knowing that you need to have some flexibility at the local level to permit projects and attract the developers to make things like this happen. So you're doing all the right things at the local level to see your community continue to thrive. A few things I would just note. A couple of weeks ago, I think now, we released what is called the Future of Work report If you haven't looked at it, take a glance in your free time. There's a lot of important information there. I was trying to be polite, not just give you a homework assignment, but there's a lot of important information in there because life has changed. Everything has changed after this pandemic has settled on us all. And we can't just look at the future and think about the past and we're just going to do things the same. But it clearly is a report that speaks to the regions of our Commonwealth and the uniqueness of each region and what your challenges and opportunities are. And here on the Cape, you clearly have uniqueness in that sometimes of the year you have your usual year-round population, then you have a sort of workforce challenge when employers are looking for people to come here and populate your businesses to work and are finding it really difficult to attract labor because they can't find places in which to live. And then the other opportunity is that the future of work means that there are more people just choosing to live here as a year-round residents because they can work remotely, and that I feel will be a more permanent part of our future as well. The other part is a recognition by the U.S. News and World Report that Massachusetts is, I think it said, the most prosperous state in the country. And while that's a really nice thing to be able to say, I worry that we could rest on our laurels and feel like, well, it's just a great state. Massachusetts will always be a great state. That's not the case.
No, we made it a great state, Lieutenant Governor, right?
We made it a great state. After we made it a great state, we want to keep it a great state, right? And I just worry a lot.
Shut up, right there. I mean, I waited as long as I could before I said something.
Oh, man.
We did. We can't hang on that message. We fulfilled it. But we had a lot of work to do to keep this a great place for everyone. And clearly, this past year and a half, there are people that were not able to access opportunity. And I think those gaps are even more profound for women that maybe are not fully into the workforce, Latino and Black communities not accessing the opportunities in this state. And we're having a discussion around housing, but that is an integral piece of how people prosper. And the exclamation point I want to put, like multiple ones, is on home ownership. I think rental is great, but I think there's got to be more home ownership in communities where people can afford to buy, lay their roots down, even next generation, you know, the sons and daughters of people who live here and they want their kids to literally come home and be able to afford to live in a place like Falmouth. We got to think about how to solve that problem. So we're here to solve all the problems of the world today. And we're going to do that in a little bit of time here. But I just want to say thank you. You're problem solvers, you're making good choices, and it's making a difference. And thank you for your time today.
So we also have Krista Cornegay, who runs Mass Housing on our behalf, Jennifer Maddox, who runs the Department of Office of Communities and Development, and Mike Kennealy, who's the Secretary of Housing and Economic Development. But we're here in part to hear, and we got Clark Ziegler here from the Mass Housing Partnership. We're here to hear from you. So the floor is yours. And if you don't ask us any questions or raise any issues, we're probably going to keep talking. So it's up to you.
Governor, if I could make the first pitch.
Go for it.
Yeah.
So we're in a unique place of opportunity here, where you're right, we have more challenges based upon COVID, and our housing stock getting eaten up by the level of prices that have been raised, and that's a problem for affordable housing. But we have a couple of things going for us. One is the creativity. With former Rep. Turkington and the housing team here, not seeing the boundaries of leaving this particular place alone, but finding a creative solution. And we do that all over the Cape. The second thing is we have resources that are unique to the Cape, which is Cape Cod Commission, sitting across from me, as well as the Chamber of Commerce. And that means we have an opportunity for a regional approach for the entire Cape, because although all of the towns and villages have their unique problems and also assets, we can look at it with expertise that's available if we can get the right funding and start to problem solve. And because we've already got a history of that with solving water problems, for example. So I want to pitch it to the other side of the table, if I could. Rob?
Sure. Thank you again, Governor, Lieutenant Governor. Good to see you again. And thank Secretary Kennealy for making the trip down last month to the same building that Lieutenant Governor joined him with 2 years ago, which has now been completed.
That's great.
And we've got great work going around the corner being supported by Mass Development. And everything you said is true in terms of everyone, I think, hit on the challenges that the Cape has with the second home buyers competing with, first time, working families, and that driving the cost of properties beyond the reach of working families. We also have unique challenges here in terms of wages. I grew up in Somerville, but down here now, we don't have Somerville rents because we don't have biotech salaries, we don't have financial services. So while what folks can afford in rents is suppressed, costs are driven higher. And picking up on what Sue mentioned, and I've had the privilege of working with her on the Barnstable County Economic Development Council. The Cape is unique, but shares characteristics as well with some counties and towns in Western Mass in terms of where second home buyers are going and where that unique competition is. So we've pulled together, over the course of the past, several months, an informal group, including Christy and joined here with Elisa as well. But looking at the possibility of something similar to the Gateway Cities program that might, take account for the uniqueness, here of the Cape, which it stretches, Cape-wide, also shares characteristics with Western Mass. But through that designation, bringing into these communities on the Cape, some of the programs that are afforded to gateway cities. One in particular, would be the Commonwealth Builder program. So great program.
What do you think, Crystal?
More communities want in on that.
Wonderful program.
We agree. We created it.
Yes, absolutely. It's fantastic, and it would be one that I think could go a long way, toward meeting needs here, both in subsidizing, that cost of construction.
There's $200 million in that bill we presented to the legislature to expand the Commonwealth Builders Program.
Only 200?
Only 200.
And we've left room for
Remember,
the legislators to add more.
that thing leverages a lot of private money.
No, absolutely.
I mean, it's not just a $200 million opportunity.
But
right?
bringing those opportunities, Governor, to the Cape would be meaningful, both in terms of addressing the increased cost of housing production here, but allowing families to to access all the benefits of unlocking equity, of putting down the roots in community. So those programs and others that are afforded through Mass Development. But looking at unique designation and perhaps bringing in some programs to uniquely to meet those needs. So it's and I'll hand it off to Elisa. But
That's a really legit issue, the Western Mass piece, the Berkshires and the Barnstable County question, the two Bs.
Yep.
Bristol, they got that issue down
Dukes
there?
County too.
And Dukes County too, fine.
Yeah.
No more. I mean, that is a completely, we don't have that problem in Somerville.
No.
Okay? We don't have the problem in Swampscott, right? People who live in a lot of the places that are in and around what you would call sort of the greater metropolitan Boston or even the greater metropolitan Worcester area, people are, they're single home.
Right.
You don't have a lot of people chasing second homes in those places.
Right.
It makes a big difference.
That's
right. Yeah.
So I work at Housing Assistance Corporation, and we have the RAFT and IRMA contract HCEC. And in our office in the past month, we have had over 50 individuals coming in, 50 households coming in. Their place is sold, they're fully employed, they have to quit their job and leave. The place is sold to someone else who's moving in, and there's no place for them to go. There are literally no rentals. We have less than a 1% vacancy in rentals on the Cape. So it is
Just year-round?
year-round, yeah.
So it's not just season?
No, it's not. We need dormitory housing as well for some of our seasonal workers, but really what my agency is focused on and the programs we're focused on is year-round housing for our Section 8 vouchers who are on the street right now and can't find a place to use the voucher. It's part of the reason the Snowmass program isn't working is we don't have a place for people to move to. And we are seeing it just escalate, and it's exacerbated because of the COVID situation when any white-collar worker can work anywhere that they want, right? They choose their vacation, their favorite vacation destination, and they're coming here, which is great, but it's not an or,
No,
it's gotta be an and.
Yeah, it's gotta be an and.
And the only way for it to be an and is for us to be able to start with housing production. Right now, we have 2 projects in the queue. They are exceeding the DHCD requirements, maximum allowable per unit cost. Like, those projects are in jeopardy of being able to even come to completion. So we need to figure out a way for for everybody to come together and to get money into our region as quick as possible.
Yeah, you think it's urgent?
Yeah, I think it's
Like it needs to happen now. Really?
Yeah.
Okay, that's good.
Exactly, and I can echo and put an exclamation point.
Can you say that into the microphone?
Every single day, fully employed people are coming into our office. They are homeless. They're living in their car. Our outreach team, the caseload has more than doubled. And these are not chronically homeless people. These are people that are employed and now living in their car, trying to get through.
Could you talk about the pipeline of permitted projects that are ready to go to address that issue that you're talking about?
I mean, I think, we do have a pipeline of projects. So I work on the 8 lower Cape towns, and for the last 3 years, we've been doing a lot of capacity building with all of our communities. Running a housing institute for local officials, kind of stealing Clark's program and just bringing it down to the backyard so that our local officials can easily access it. And we've seen town meetings in the Lower Cape in the last 3 years pass over $30 million in funding for housing initiatives with local funds. Every single Lower Cape town has at least one parcel that is in the development pipeline.
Let's stay on this one for a second,
Yeah.
because all of those towns on the Cape just got part of the $3.5 billion that went to cities and towns from the federal level. And we've had conversations with a lot of communities who said to us, they want to put their money alongside our money to leverage both and to do things like transformational housing opportunities.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
I mean, it's.
Well, and you know what I want to say, and we've got amazing partners.
Wait,
So
wait.
it's like $1 billion
Yeah,
in environmental
that's what the
infrastructure in that
towns are telling
proposal
me,
too.
that they want to
Same
spend it on
thing,
wastewater.
fine.
Yeah.
And we've got a ton of, I mean, there's a lot of federal money attached to our proposal around wastewater too.
And we've got, great partners with the state. Some of our towns now have $1 million a year in short-term rental tax money coming in that we are working on, I've been saying that money, all of that money needs to go to housing. Yeah, town of Provincetown can go out and bond $20 million right now to do housing. And they're working on it. They've got an RFP out for 70+ units.
This is just the thing that we passed a couple years ago, right?
Yeah.
Well, that matured in a hurry.
It's about time that we finally captured that money, because it's been there for a long time. But I think, Governor, one of the it really comes down to, and Senator Sear said this when a number of us were together in Brewster a few weeks ago, said the problem is actually our local political will. And I think there are definitely things we can do to move dollars forward. Housing choice, we now have 2 ADU bylaws by right in Truro and Wellfleet now, thanks to housing choice that just passed at town meeting. But we still, in addition to all of the carrots that the state is providing, maybe we also need to be providing, having some more sticks with our local communities and really putting the pressure on local officials and local communities to change their zoning law, to make it easier to build housing by right, and to understand that we can't get ourselves out of this housing problem with 10, 15 units a year. We need to be seeing larger projects that are going to revitalize our downtowns that are now being sewered as well.
Yeah, I would just follow up on that. I mean, right now you've got Mashpee Commons that's looking to expand 1,700 units of housing. You've got 700 units of housing that are in the permitting process in one way or another for Greater Hyannis. But they're running into a handful of folks that are opposing it from different civic associations that are influential with town councilors and planning board members, and it's become difficult. When you're talking about an offer by a guy like Buff Chase to invest $500 million in housing in Mashpee, and they're just assaulted
by a handful of local people that are against
Okay, are
the project.
the opposition both or one or the other not adopting more housing as a policy and or the costs associated with developing housing? Like they don't want their taxes to go up or they just don't want more housing?
They don't want more housing.
Traffic.
They're concerned
want more
about traffic, parking, community character, all the kinds of things that you hear
To
about.
balance out.
But they've already permitted other units like Southport. There's another development down there, 750 units there. So they've already permitted fairly large projects, but they are
But
against this one.
housing, we need all kinds of housing. And that's why housing choice is special, because each community figures out what kind of housing works for them. We need affordable, yes. We need rental, yes. We need home ownership. We need senior, right? You need multifamily or micro units, whatever it is. Every community needs housing someplace to
And
serve their community.
I think that's the plan, is this, in Hyannis and in Mashpee Commons, it's really around building activity centers, places that have existing infrastructure or planned infrastructure to handle it. And on the Cape, we have a monoculture of housing. It's single-family homes, one-story clad in gray shingles everywhere.
On the Lower Cape, 92% of the housing is single-family housing.
And so what we need is a diversity in housing typology that will bring different units onto the market at different prices so that it can be affordable for everybody. And the way to get that is with appropriate density in appropriate areas. The Cape Cod Commission has done outstanding job with its 2018 regional policy plan identifying these areas, but we are having a tremendously difficult time moving some of the local towns to adopt that.
Paul, what do you hear from employers?
Well, wait, can I just stay on this for
Yeah,
one second? Because as much as I agree and we need the larger developments, we also need infill and we need money to be able to do the small projects because those are easier to get done in
Yes.
towns and then every developer, not just nonprofit developers, can be part of it. And so, you know, the CSHI program, right, more money for that kind of housing is really, really crucial for us.
But I think to your point, Alyssa, too, is that the per unit costs don't work on the Cape. And sometimes, some, I think the high density stuff can work, that's fine. I think there are some developments that in more rural areas or more, they're not the downtown centers that still need to be built because that's where they need to get done and the per unit caps and they just don't work.
Right, I'm glad you brought that up, Tara, because it's our Brewster Woods project right now that we're doing with POA. We're at 420 per unit, and we've already exceeded the DHCD limit. So we're having to go back and try to figure out how do we add more funding.
Now, is that a
to keep it
temporary
going.
thing, or is that like I mean, because there's a ton of this going on in markets right
No,
now.
right.
No, part of it is we've got an affordability problem on the Cape because you've got 400 miles of coastline, so land values are high and the average median wage is below the state average. And so there's just a mismatch.
And going to the employers, we don't have enough contractors to satisfy the jobs that are out there right now. Like if we could put a shovel in the ground, we could get a project going. We'd be a year and a half, 2 years out to get a contractor that can come in and do it.
And those contractors are choosing between, you know, building high-end homes, you know, in the shores of Katuitt, or, you know, building workforce housing in downtown Hyannis. I mean,
But it's somewhat of a short-term problem, though, the contractor availability right now, because I think we could get contractors from off Cape before. I think it's still a challenge. I think the costs are still there, though. There's still very high costs regardless. Yeah.
Well, in Falmouth, it's definitely possible to get off-Cape developers. You know,
In Provincetown, no.
Right,
We're paying for that.
Let me talk about Falmouth for a minute, since we've been doing regional for a while. But in preparation for this meeting here, I went on the internet last night and looked up year-round housing in Falmouth. And I looked at every single listing that every single broker and every single entity had. And I found 10 year-round rentals available in the town of Falmouth right now. They range from $1,700 a month plus utilities to $11,500 a month plus utilities. The other place I went was Airbnb. There are 300 listings on Airbnb in the town of Falmouth, up to $500 a night.
Yikes.
So you see what we're up against. There is no rental, and no one has ever built rental here except the subsidized versions that the state and the feds help with. No one has built one. Why would that? The market is for everything else, so we are really up the creek. I want to thank you.
That's really interesting, okay.
Thank you for bringing in this housing choice legislation. Our planning board now has a bylaw which we're going to bring to the town meeting in November, which takes advantage of every single section in that bill. Yeah?
Now you're talking.
It's an overlay district, suitable sites, 12 of them in the town of Falmouth. It allows the current commercial use plus 20 units per acre. 25% paid to be rental to the 80% people. 75% of the market by right. Site plan review only. You can walk in
That's great.
and get your permit
That's great.
from the planning board, nobody else.
That's great.
And I think we're not gonna need your majority vote, because I think the Falmouth Town Meeting is gonna vote for this thing overwhelmingly. They know how important this is, and they know we have nothing right now to offer people for rental.
Yeah, that's great.
That's great.
Very good.
So I want to bring it back to the regional discussion because that's what we like to talk about over here on this side of the table.
That's really,
That was really, I hope everything you just told us is exactly right, because I'm gonna say that a couple of thousand times in the next few weeks.
No pressure. Yeah.
That was really
Great, thanks,
Yeah.
Eric, yeah.
But I think Eric makes really great points about the needs of Falmouth and the communities on this area of the Cape. But those are very different from some of the needs that we have in the other regions of the Cape. And I couldn't echo more what the Lieutenant Governor was saying about the need for diversity in the types of units that we have and that we're creating here in the region. And focused growth is really important, and that's what we've been spending a lot of time doing. So putting together a regional strategy to look at housing development on the Cape, housing production where it makes sense, where there's appropriate and adequate infrastructure, is really that next step so that we can focus those investments in the areas where we can accomplish this and accomplish what we need for our region.
Well, that was one of the reasons why, there was Commonwealth Builder money, there was homeownership money, there was senior and veterans assisted services housing money, there was downtown development money, and there was a lot of money around environmental infrastructure because, we get the fact that for a lot of communities, it's gonna be like, and a region, right, it's gonna be the whole package. And I think in some ways, this is an unusual opportunity because you have, for one of the few times, well, maybe like the only time I can remember in my lifetime, you have a very significant opportunity to make discretionary investments on the state side. And you have cities and towns who have discretionary resources available to them as well. And you put those two things together with a lot of the existing programming that's already in place, and people could do some really interesting things. And part of the reason we put all that infrastructure in there on the environmental side was because we wanted the housing piece to be successful, and we get the fact that in some cases they're related.
Philip, you want to
If I
jump
can,
in?
yeah, I just want to bring us to the island,
Yeah.
from the regional, representing the island for the Cape and Islands here. I appreciate you all coming here and listening. I just wanted to, first of all, just say we as an organization, we're a community development corporation and also a community land trust, and we have done both ownership and rental. And we've been able to do ownership successfully using just CPA funding at about $100,000 a unit. Now, obviously, costs have changed over the past 12 months, but it has been successful and the community has been behind it. We need rental housing more than ever, so we've been focusing on that.
There's also $200 million in there for rental housing, too.
Exactly. So that has been a huge thing for us, and I've got to say that Crystal coming when she did several years ago and listening to our challenges in terms of the lack of capacity at the town level. There's just no one, there's no planners, there's no one who's capable of applying, let alone administering grant funding. So the work that she's done with Mass Housing has enabled us to unlock about 100 units of housing that our organization is going to be pursuing, both in Oak Bluffs and Edgartown. And that's because of the feasibility study and RFP work that was done through their assistance. And it's huge, because otherwise the towns just, the leadership typically just discounts it because they're working with volunteer boards, and they don't have the professional backing to get these projects through. So I just was in Oak Bluffs yesterday speaking with a volunteer who was showing us the site. Again, another huge issue for us is infrastructure. We just don't have it. We're all completely maxed out in terms of the centralized systems, but we do have very innovative programs in terms of new technology for septic systems, both commercial and residential. And frankly, that is going to unlock a lot of ability. I mean, we need to have that across the island, it needs to be a legal and moral obligation that people put these systems in. They're available, they're reasonable in terms of price, and they work. I mean, we're achieving levels that are similar to what public septic systems are, 5 parts per million so far. So that is another huge area. Subsidies are for us, and we just have never seen anything like this. Just several years ago, we were doing units at probably, 350 to 400,000 without land costs, and now we're closer to 500. I mean, it's just been remarkable. Having said that, we need to keep this train going, and we have the capacity now on a local level, as many other CDCs do here on the Cape, but we need to continue this because success is going to breed success, and we need to bring all the resources to bear. We believe that it needs to come from our local sources, so we have, and we're putting together supporting the legislation. I believe it's now, House Bill 2895 for housing bank funding. That could unlock a lot of funding, as our housing trust has done in the past. So that is something that we're hoping that you will support and your administration, because we feel like we have to bring housing bank funding from real estate transfer taxes to bear on our problem in a creative way, because we have a lot of small scale initiatives. Unfortunately, that is what we have to contend with. We do occasionally have these larger LIHTC deals, but they're far and few between.
Who filed the bill?
That was Representative Fernandez.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's before the Revenue Committee right now.
Is it similar to the system that the Cape adopted for revenue?
There are several municipalities on the Cape, Nantucket, Boston now, who all have home rule petitions. But there's a statewide bill.
Also have home rule
Yeah,
petitions.
that Fernandez filed, Representative Fernandez filed, and that's being reviewed now.
It's a statewide proposal.
That is a statewide proposal,
That
yeah. It's a
explains
tax
why. When you
on
said
any
Fernandez,
sales
I
over
thought
$1 million.
That's interesting. He has everything to do with the Cape. Okay.
Dylan Fernandez.
Oh, that
Fernandez.
Yeah.
This
Sorry.
community. Is a representative from Nantucket, or do you also handle
No,
Nantucket?
we have colleagues in Nantucket. They're actually coming tomorrow. There's a large delegation,
Okay.
about 12, who are going to be speaking to our various partners on the island, because they like to work in the same capacity. But yeah, I just like to say that it's
How does the
finally
land
done.
trust piece factor into that?
So the land trust piece is essentially a leasehold model, where we own the land, we lease it for 99 years, so that we can essentially help homeowners throughout their longevity.
And it creates a certain amount of stability around what happens generally with the.
Yeah, we create essentially these small pocket neighborhoods, and we've been able to successfully, not only that, but they can secure competitive financing because it's a Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac product. So it's not these one-off, deed riders and so forth that the banks don't know what to do with, and then they keep them in-house. These loans can get sold. So our homeowners are getting very competitive financing.
Governor and Lieutenant Governor, can I want to emphasize the wastewater infrastructure piece.
But he's a manager, he gets to speak more.
Number 2 for me. I want to emphasize the wastewater infrastructure piece. That's an important element of the development in which we're sitting. This is connected to Falmouth's centralized wastewater management system. And I have with us here today is our Select Board Chair, Doug Brown, and Vice Chair Nancy Taylor. And they're an important part of this whole
You guys
initiative.
just put your hands up so we know.
Doug and Nancy is here. And to my right, as you know, is Eric Turkington, who chairs the town's Water Quality Management Committee, which has been a real spark in terms of moving ahead on wastewater initiatives. One of our challenges has been that we have a centralized wastewater treatment plant, the largest on the Cape, but we have significant controls from DEP that do not allow us to treat even 50% of the capacity of the treatment plant. We can't handle 50% because we're throttled back on our permits. And that is an ongoing concern. It is an issue which arises every few years and which continues to put a lid on what we can do on enhanced density like we have here, and like we have in other areas of downtown.
Stop talking.
We
So
know.
we need your help on that, and we welcome your help, but it's about local leadership that's gotten us to where we are on wastewater.
And since we're in wastewater, just for a second here now, the system that he's describing, it gets, the in-ground and the backyard septic system gets under 5 parts per millimeter, has not been and will not ever be approved by DEP for general use, because DEP's rules for general use are, you gotta put 12 of them into the ground and wait for 3 years, you gotta put 50 more into the ground and wait for 50 years, and then we might think about approving them. So they didn't, and they haven't, and that.
Have they been in the ground somewhere for a while?
Not in that number.
They're in provisional status
They
right now.
get provisional status, but they're a long way from general use, and that's because of their rules.
No, but I mean, like, in places other than Massachusetts.
Some of them have. The ones that really work well, frankly, are pretty local. At the
Yeah, they're here on the Cape, and then, he's actually done work in Saudi Arabia, but large systems. And very simple systems. It's essentially just a carbon filtration system with wood chips.
The Massachusetts Test
Uses very
Center
little energy.
has proven that these things work.
Is this Dr. Hufelder's
Yes,
experience?
George.
Right in
Yeah,
Barnstable,
George.
he has a test field. It's fantastic. You should go and tour it. He's got about 8 of them that he runs. He knows all the percentages. He's presented to Barnstable County government many, many times, and I'm sure you're nodding there. This is,
Probably,
You should go visit,
Katie
but we
can
should
do
definitely
it.
get
it'll be
Katie.
great to tour.
All right, why don't we follow up on that? Make sure we do that.
Yeah.
How many, in your provisional status, how many
That's not a
systems
great
are?
state to- You got this thing called the Everglades? It's not a good story.
To answer your question, we're on our 5th system. This is going to be a 40-bedroom system that we're putting in for the 20 units that we're currently constructing. But there are many other applications. So they have a retrofitted system. You can take a typical Title V and you can put this into the stream of that in order to bring those nitrogen levels down. So it's not just for new construction, it also can retrofit existing.
And it's called
they
the
have-
layer cake, and it has wood chips, so it's
Right.
nothing confusing or technical or all that. It's really very straightforward, and there's a
Well,
lot
if
of
we have
research
a pilot
on it.
program right
How
there
long-
that's proving it effective.
How long has he been running the field?
Barnstable, it's right near the base. I don't know.
He's
10
been operating on the vineyard for the last 5 years, but
Yeah, at least.
we've actually submitted a grant application back in
The
June.
test center,
for this.
you fellows pay for the test center.
I think we've tested it long enough.
Lieutenant Governor will be visiting soon.
Right up my alley.
I was actually I'm glad you brought that up, because I was gonna ask you if that system was approved or not. Okay.
Yeah, it's provisional right now, but, so it will require a lot of testing and costs associated with that until it becomes what they can just
Yeah,
do.
okay, all right. We'll follow up on that one.
Yeah, I'll send you some information.
Another opportunity are accessory dwelling units.
We agree.
Yeah, I know you do. And we've taken advantage of changing the bylaw in about 4 towns since housing choice legislation.
Barnstable just last Thursday.
Yep.
Did they approve it?
Yes.
Yep. I have a list here, actually. I have some handouts here I can give you of like where we are with rental assistance, what our housing market looks like, what
Okay.
the data is on where we are with ADUs. But the accessory dwelling unit is what I'm finding in the research is that it's very similar to solar panels, right? When we were trying to get solar panels on the roof so that homeowners would participate in clean energy and solving this community problem. And so accessory dwelling units, we have the opportunity to do the same thing, right? Where if we incentivize the homeowner and we have favorable loan products and we have technical assistance available, all the same components to the solar panels, we can bring more ADUs online. And so we've been looking at the commission's data as they've done housing studies with second homeowners. And there's like 3,000 second homeowners that said that they would build an ADU unit. So literally within about 6 months, we could have hundreds of units online. right? With the new bylaw changes, if we had a way for technical assistance and for incentive payments so that people felt more confident moving forward. You know, as a homeowner, as a single mom, you know, I wouldn't know where to begin trying to get a contractor and trying to change my house around to allow the bedroom count to change and figure out what the permitting process is. So our agency, we have a proposal before Secretary Kennealy to look at that, for us to be the pilot for the state to do the technical assistance, add the incentive payment, and to work with our colleagues who are contractors in the region in order to bring some of those online.
I mean, it could be a similar model to what we do with CDBG money for around housing rehab. That we have program administrators who help that homeowner who's not a real estate developer do the needs assessment, put the work order together, secure the financing, inspect the work as it gets done, and then probably another component is a little help with how to be a good landlord.
Well,
But homeowners, I think, are willing to do this. They're just really overwhelmed
Exactly, they're
by
overwhelmed with it.
how do I create this?
The only problem with the CDBG money is that there's too many obstacles.
Yeah,
put in
yeah,
the way.
no.
You
I'm
know,
not suggesting we
not
using
wanting to
CDBG for it.
right,
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
But, the monitoring, what we were gonna do with the incentive payment was also monitor the home so that it is a year-round lease and we monitor it for 5 years. So the idea is that it would be a forgivable loan after 5 years if they used it as a year-round rental, and if they didn't, they'd have to pay it back.
I mean, I've done
So-
some
so it makes sense.
modeling
Concept.
on the outer and lower Cape, and even with rents, there really isn't even, you can go to and get a HELOC on your house and pay the $50,000 to $100,000 it's gonna take to make an ADU. And what people just need is some help navigating that process and figuring out how to do that.
The money for the monitoring is key, though, because what we're fighting is exactly what Eric said, not turning these into Airbnbs. That's our problem right there, because it's really probably the third biggest source of income on the Cape is renting parts of your home. A lot of folks literally move out and go stay in a trailer for summer rentals because they are so incredibly lucrative. And so that's the other piece that we really need help on is that monitoring for the 5-year forgivable loan. I think that's a great incentive.
Yeah, we do monitoring now for affordable, home ownership and rentals, so it would be the same situation.
It's a really good idea.
Yeah, it's already built in, we already have the infrastructure to do it, so.
I mean, just on that point that the senator made, in Provincetown, we did a study about 3 years ago that showed that you could buy a 2-bedroom condo. You live in Boston, it's your little getaway. And if you want to be a good citizen, you could, put that on the year-round rental market for maybe $1,300, $1,400 a month. But if you put it up on Airbnb for 120 days, you're going to make $18,000 more. And you can take it for a week in August and use it in the off-season. Yeah. So that's the delta that we're trying to overcome between what the short-term Airbnb market does versus trying to even just have year-round market rate rental houses.
Trying to build a year-round workforce.
Right,
Yeah,
right,
that's right.
yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
I mean, families for people making $60,000, $70,000, $80,000, $90,000 a year, we have no options for them.
That being said, though, we're starting to see a turn where neighborhoods are really starting to say enough with the Airbnbs.
I don't want to live in a hotel.
Sort of, exactly, because of that, the sustainability on the Cape is also an issue because we need workforce. We have, whatever the statistic is, 60% over 60, and it's growing where everyone is having difficulty. Everyone is having difficulty after COVID. But it just really speaks about something that we've been grappling with and we're trying to continue to balance.
That's a huge challenge, absolutely.
Governor, if I could just raise one more concern that's kind of a little further down the road, but I know it's one that your administration has been very active in, and it's this has got a concern kind of from the housing production and cost of housing, but it's the impacts of the net zero code and kind of how that housing choice was such a huge step forward in putting a tool on the table in terms of housing production. But I think as you're hearing around the table today, the costs of production, on the Cape, being elevated, and the margins, being thin. So concern over, what the new net zero code might add, to the cost of housing production down the line. And, tying in with what Elisa said, a good example of kind of climate policy that worked was, rooftop solar. But you had, all the financial programs, surrounding that in terms of tax credits and rebates and low interest loans. So hopefully, one of the directives that we hope is taken up as the code is being developed is to look at those incremental costs of changes in the code, look at what the cumulative impact will be on housing production, and then looking at what programs, might be to offset or mitigate. The Cape is a region where we care about housing, and climate, and I think that is kind of finding that, that way that a code could move forward, be adopted, but not have it, be a step back for housing production.
Did you follow the discussion we had with the legislature on that one?
Very closely, yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
I mean,
Very closely.
We basically took the position that where they landed in the original bill would have made any solution to what you're talking about impossible. And I would have gotten a housing choice bill on a Tuesday and an environmental bill on a Wednesday that would have rendered everything in my housing choice bill irrelevant. So
Absolutely.
we sent it back, and we had a long conversation with the legislature, and a lot of other people did too. And they made what we thought were the right kinds of adjustments to get us to the point where we could put a sort of workable model in place that could deliver on both of these objectives. And that's still our point of view. So we are well aware of the issue you're raising. And by the way, so are they.
Yeah.
And I think, I'm glad you brought it up, but I think it's something that we know we need to figure out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, folks, with that, we're actually out of time. Sorry to have to end it this way.
No, you're not, Zach. You do it 4 or 5 times a day.
Yeah, but we're going for ice cream after this, so I'm very excited. So, all we're gonna ask is that all the members of the roundtable, if you guys wouldn't mind, please making your way outside. We're gonna do a quick group photo before we end today.
Okay, can I just, on behalf of.
Thank you very much, by the way.
Yeah, thank you.
On behalf of Affirmative Investments in Falmouth Housing Corp., we are so glad that you came. We are so thankful that you're here and all the work that you're doing for affordable housing all meets. So thank you.
Thank you.